5 Live Formula One.
Hello and welcome to Silverstone, the home of the British Grand Prix. Now, it may be Wimbledon, it may be the Euros, but here, this takes centre stage. 480,000 people poured into this track last year. They're hoping to top that this year. The atmosphere is buzzing. So many people already here for the 3 days. And what a treat they are in for. The championship is absolutely electric. There may well be 81 points separating Max Verstappen and Lando Norris. But we certainly have a fight on our hands. Few will bet against Verstappen winning his 4th title, but there might be sparks along the way. Sitting round the square table at the paddock, just by a bar with music pumping out and a loudspeaker to our right, we have Jolyon Palmer, former F1 driver. We also have Mark Priestley, former F1 mechanic for McLaren, and Andrew Benson, of course, our F1 correspondent. And Andrew, you've just been up close and personal with a bona fide movie star. Tell us more.
I walked past Brad Pitt in the paddock, Jenny. Yes, they're filming the forthcoming movie again this weekend. There's a briefing for the media with the director and the producer a little bit later.
You can't tell them that. It's so like off the record, hush hush.
Did you have
meeting.
goosebumps? You started nearly faint?
I've seen Brad before close up. He was around last year.
Never in doubt.
It's fine.
They've got these annoying Tannoy messages, which means that this is a massive event, so we're going to battle against that. They've got loads of bands playing here across the weekend. It's turned into a real festival event, hasn't it?
It's amazing, and I'm just sitting here wondering if Brad Pitt is somewhere in this paddock thinking, I just walked past Andrew Benson.
I doubt it.
Yeah, it's a big event, massive, highlight of the year for most of us here, highlight for the hundreds of thousands of fans. And they should have a proper good show in their hands this weekend as well.
Well, we will sit down with Lando Norris on the show, as well as Oliver Behrman. Do you know his name? You should do by now. He sat in for Carlos Sainz when he was sick in the Ferrari in Saudi Arabia, and he will be permanently joining Haas for next year. He's a Ferrari young driver. It's a good opportunity. We'll hear from him as well. But Andrew, thoughts? Lando Norris versus Max Verstappen last time out in Austria. It's all kicked off.
It certainly did kick off, Jenny. Interestingly, talking to them both in the last few days, I think the key thing for both of them is that they want to stay friends. You know, and Verstappen was saying today that they'd had a chat this week about the collision that they had, and they both, as they both say, you know, it was a tiny, tiny touch, but it ended both their races effectively. Although Verstappen did get to the finish in 5th place. But they wanted to stay friends. Verstappen was saying that they agreed on 99% of the incident. Norris still believes that Verstappen moved under braking, by the way. We might get onto that with Jolyon in a minute. And actually, interestingly, you can read about this on the BBC Sport website. He didn't exactly say it in as many words, but Verstappen basically admitted that, yes, he had a little bit. He talked about moving. It's a natural reaction to move, to defend when someone's coming down the inside of you. I think we're just all excited for the next sort of episode of the battle, aren't we?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Jolyon, we'll hear from Lando Norris in just a moment, and it was an in-depth interview that you did exclusively for the BBC. But what were your thoughts when you saw the incident?
It was the culmination of a lot of hard racing, but a lot of contentious moments, I think, on Verstappen's side. And I think that, you know, the incident, they're right, the incident was not big. It had big consequences. Norris out, Verstappen, I mean, both of them puncturing, Russell comes through to win the race. So it was a dramatic consequence for a small touch. But I thought Verstappen in the lead was doing everything he possibly could to keep Norris behind, as you'd expect. But I just thought sometimes it was too far, what he did. The moving under braking, I think, is clear. I didn't think that particularly on its own would be a penalty, but it is certainly something that in usual circumstances the FIA would warn him on. I thought the way he kept position off the track was not right. I thought that would have been a penalty 10 seconds, as precedent has shown this year. That should have been a 10-second penalty on its own. And then there's the contact, which was born out of Norris having tried to go up the inside and not pulled off the move because Verstappen had either moved under braking or kept it throttle in around the outside and kept himself there to be in inverted commas forced off. So at that point you try something different. Max covers the middle of the road, Lando goes to the outside, and the space is there. and it's kind of taken away as Verstappen then moves back to the left-hand side. Could Lando have avoided it? Yes, he could have gone onto the curb. Should he have had to avoid? No, because Max should have left the space there in the first place.
And as a racing driver then, if you're in Lando's position, how do you look back on it? Do you look back on it and say, well, I'm holding my line there, although that gap is closing as Max is moving over towards the curb? Do you feel, if you're Lando Norris, do you feel like you were in the right, even though it ended your race? Or do you feel like, with hindsight, you should have moved left? Or which is... The point is, when they go racing again, this sort of thing is going to happen. They're going to be on the same bit of tarmac. They're both going to be desperate to win. Does Lando now approach racing differently? Does Max, I don't think, is going to approach racing differently?
So I think Lando is going to be more wary racing Max than he ever has been. I think he's been very respectful to Max, not least on the sprint. He then gave Verstappen a chance to come back as he'd made a clean move.
Yeah.
I think he's underestimated how Max can drive. And so if I'm Lando, I'm looking at that on a Sunday night or a Monday, and I'm thinking, shame, I've got no points. I could have given a bit of space and gone on the curb. But also, sometimes you have to hold your ground, because had he gone on the curb, there would be no collision. Max wouldn't have got a penalty. But Lando's then jumping out of the way of Max, not leaving space and avoiding a collision, and he's probably also then meaning he's not going to get the exit and the chance to overtake at the next corner.
Well, I suppose there's two ways to look at it, because if we say what happened, Max got this 10-second penalty, so was deemed to be in the wrong. Lando didn't move, and then therefore the collision happened. So if we go racing again, what has to happen to stop these things from happening over again? If Max isn't going to change his viewpoint and the way he drives, and Lando isn't going to move over onto the curb.
So I think there was a really interesting parallel 5 years ago. In Austria, Charles Leclerc and Max Verstappen were fighting for the lead, and Verstappen raced very much like he did with Norris, and Leclerc was not happy about it, and he felt that the move that Max eventually won the race with was not clean and fair. But he then looked at that and said, okay, well, if that's going to be allowed from now on, I can drive like that too. And they came here for the next race, and Leclerc and Verstappen had the most brutal, hard fight. And Leclerc did not give an inch. He forced Verstappen off if he had to, and he basically won that fight in the initial instance. Eventually, Verstappen got ahead like 20-odd laps later. Yeah. But over those first laps, he won by being Max Verstappen in a Ferrari. And I think maybe Lando has to do that. And
actually having the contact, standing your ground on one day in Austria, might make Max think, I can't just force this guy around, and he's not going to just jump out of the way. I have to give him a little bit more space.
Yeah. When does Max give anyone more space? Max isn't known for giving more space. He didn't give it to Hamilton. He hasn't given it to Leclerc.
What's interesting is that when he raced with Leclerc at Silverstone that time 5 years ago, he had to give in the end.
And I think Lando will have to have a similar approach and actually get his own elbows out a little bit more. I know he fired in some lunges, but I think they were clean attempts to try and pass. They were from a long way back. They looked pretty flary, but there was nothing that would even raise the eyebrows of the stewards, whereas I think a lot of Max's individual moments would have done. And the overriding thing that I find a slight shame in this is the amount of times I think Max, he races hard. Sometimes it's brilliant. In Barcelona, we all spoke about it. What a brilliant drive. Overtaking, it was decisive, and he made it stick. But it's rare that he settles for second. And I think there's a few too many times where he will force the stewards to make a decision. And that's what I think he was doing in Austria, whether it's Austria 2019, passing Leclerc. He'd had a battle cleanly for a couple of laps, and then he forced Leclerc off the road, wins the race on track, makes the stewards decide who wins the race. They decided Max was just about okay. He won. Think of 2021. The move with Hamilton in Brazil, for example, he kept the place. It was ridiculous. He shouldn't have kept the place by going 4 cars width off the track. But he makes the stewards give him a penalty, or he's not going to let the car through on track. The same in Jeddah. If you think even to Vegas last year, passes Leclerc off the track, rather than potentially not taking the place or giving the place up on circuit, he makes the stewards give him a 5-second penalty. And it's not an easy position for the stewards to be in, because this is a race-defining moment.
And this is the point, isn't it? This is the point that McLaren boss Andrea Stella made after Austria. He was saying that in the past, these sorts of incidents by Verstappen haven't been punished by the stewards, and that's why he feels able to race in that manner now. And you're absolutely right about all those points. I think Verstappen has won out in his own head in those situations because he's forced the stewards to make a decision, and they haven't made the decision to penalise him. And they did penalise him in Austria, but actually, ironically, Norris suffered more for the incident. So it's really interesting to see moving forward how the stewards are going to judge that. But the history suggests, the precedent suggests, they won't penalise him more often than not, and that's why he carries on racing in that way.
And that's the thing, you can understand it because it's advantageous to him. He's ruthless. He's a champion.
It would be great if the drivers could just sort it out on track. And yes, somebody like Leclerc did, where he gets his own elbows out and pushes him back a little bit. But the point is, at some point, the stewards have to step in and they have to draw some kind of line. And I think you're right, Andrew. I think at times there's a feeling in this paddock they haven't been firm enough, and that's why this line is getting further and further and more blurred. It would be great that we don't have to involve the stewards. I'd love to see hard racing. I think what we saw last weekend, to a large extent, was brilliant. Look, we're all still talking about it now. This is what Formula One needs, is a close battle. We don't want to sterilise that. So I'm all for the occasional bit of wheel banging, occasional running each other very, very close and getting some elbows out. But there has to be somewhere, there has to be a line. And the stewards, I think, at the moment, haven't got that line firmly drawn enough so that no one knows quite where it is.
Well, let's hear from Lando Norris speaking to Andrew Benson.
Let's start with Sunday.
Of course. Of course.
Where's your head at on that 2 days on?
To be honest, I'm in a good place. I was frustrated at the time, but actually, you're filled with adrenaline. You're filled with a lot of things. But quite quickly, I think, I wouldn't necessarily change that much. I wouldn't have a different approach to what I did. And I wish things were different, but I've reviewed it, we've looked at it. I'm good to go for next weekend, and that's the most important thing.
Have you spoken to Max yet?
We've texted. We're going to have a chat, of course, because I think it's the correct thing to do. But apart from that, what we talk about and how things go is between us. So I don't need to get into anything more than that, I think, from that side. But we're two drivers who we want to race. We want to race hard, and I think we both know that. But we definitely don't want things ending like what they did, so we want to make sure we avoid that in the future.
Now, I realise you just said that's it and it's all between you, but given that you haven't spoken yet, I'll fire this one at you, okay? So after the race, you said, and in the race, he was moving under braking.
Yes.
When he spoke to us, he said, I wasn't moving under braking.
Yeah.
Which one of those is true?
I think
because you're in the car, you see, we can't challenge that.
No, but you can... I think it's clear enough, in my opinion. I really do not want to be the guy that's complaining as much as I did on the radio, and that is part of it in some ways, just like it's what happens in football and other things, That is part of it, but I want to race, and I want to race hard. So, we want to get to that point where we're not having to complain about one another doing things, and honestly, nothing that I did at all, I think, was incorrect. I think even my overtakes, they were from far back, but not that far back, realistically. And if you say they were, I'll just say I learned all of those things from Max. They're all things that Max does, and he would be very happy or proud of. So, we want to get to a point where we're not having to complain, and I don't want to do that. I don't want to have to do those things, but when you're so close to crashes happening, there's that fine margin between it not happening because I'm able to avoid a collision and I'm able to just about make it out all right and not have contact. But when it's at that level, you can't have it go any further. And that's kind of what happened. I don't think it's exactly what happened. And it was almost a disappointing end because it wasn't like it was a big bit of contact, It was the smallest touch I think you can possibly have, yet the biggest consequence. So, I want to race hard, and so does Max, and we don't want to have it kind of getting to this point, or we don't want to be talking on the radio and complaining of one another. But there were certain things I think were just very much on the line and potentially too far. But yeah, I also want to race like that. I want to race right on the edge, and that's what I'm here for in the end of the day.
Now, he did get a penalty for that move, the one where you collided in the end, even if it was a tiny contact, but it didn't actually affect him, because 10 seconds and he was 20-something ahead of the guy behind. What do you think about that?
That's I mean, it's a tough one, to be honest. Yeah, it's really hard to kind of... He was penalised for it. If we weren't as quick as we were, it would have hurt him more as a penalty. But how do you define those things? Honestly, I don't think that's something for me. But yeah, in the end of the day, he wasn't hurt by it, which is the issue here. I think you want everyone to have an appropriate penalty. You want things to be consistent. That's what we all say, and it's what people on TV want to say. It's what we want to say as drivers. We want things to be consistent. So, do you give the same penalty, whether or not someone's 10 seconds ahead of someone or not? Or does it need to be something that, no matter what the situation is, it is a penalty that does cost someone something, and is a more hurtful penalty to avoid something like that happening in the future? Because there'll be plenty of races where 10 seconds doesn't mean anything to Max or to me or people who are up the front and have a good gap. But a grid position penalty, that kind of things are more hurtful in terms of what it might affect you in the next race and things like that. So I think that's something that they might review, but this is not something for me in the end of the day to be able to try change.
Now, in your previous answer, you alluded to something that I was going to ask you about. You discovered in Austria something that Lewis Hamilton discovered through a lot of 2021.
Yeah.
In that Max does those moves, where you throw it up the inside and kind of hope for the best.
Yeah.
And the other guy has to get out of the way or whatever. And a lot of the drivers I know at the time felt Max had gone beyond the pale, particularly in Brazil, for example, in 21. Yeah. But it raises the question, if he's going to race like that, which he clearly is, and as you say, you were doing a bit of it too in Austria, how do you actually race Max Verstappen?
Yeah, well, I think kind of like I just said, from my side, I did nothing wrong. Like my overtakes, they were attempted overtakes. If there's going to have to be a rule now, you can only overtake when you're within 3 meters of a car ahead. That's not racing. So what I was doing was absolutely fine. I had small little lockups. The one time I overstepped what I did, I gave the position back immediately. So I was very fair from my side. And there was the second time that I was cleaning, I think, up the inside a long distance from Max, and he's committed to going off and staying ahead of me by just driving off the track when he definitely and 100% could have stayed on the track. And that would have been a completely hard given overtake from myself, but it turned out not to be the case. So it is a good question, because there's no simple answer in the end of the day. So it's stuff I need to prepare for, look into previous races and things like that, and understand those types of things. We need rules to be clear and defined in each and every area. But you got to be ready to give what he gives to you. It's as simple as that. And I'm definitely, I'd say, one of the first people that knew that and completely understood that before I even attempted to go race Max, is that you're going to go in with, and you're going into one of the biggest fights you can possibly have. And by no means is it at all going to be easy. And I don't want it to be easy. I love that. It was nerve-wracking. It was exciting, even for me inside the car. My eyes are wide open. I was loving it as much as I wanted it to be that little bit easier. I loved it, and it was tough, and that's literally why I do what I do. But yeah, I don't want to whine like a baby. Max doesn't want to sound the same or look the same, and we want to be able to just go and do it. And honestly, there isn't an answer. There isn't you just have to do this, because that's too simple. It's understanding what he thinks, how he thinks, all of those types of things. It's a mentality that you need to go in with.
And you'll be fine, the two of you, off track?
I think so. I mean, I think like we've said many times, because of the respect we still have, I'm not going to let something like that just suddenly blow up everything. Definitely, my adrenaline side probably got a little bit the better of me at a few of my comments, and I don't think everything I said was probably as correct as what it should be. But that's just, I'm in that environment of dealing with it. For me, it was fighting for one of my first wins. Still, it's my second win on the cards. For Max, this is 60th. So what it means to me is very different to what it means to him. So of course I'm going to be upset and maybe say some things that aren't correct or as I would like them to kind of come out, But we'll be fine.
Okay, let's widen it out a little bit. McLaren have emerged as Red Bull's biggest challenger in the last few races. But regular wins, as you've just mentioned, are sort of still slightly agonisingly out of reach.
Yeah.
How are you balancing that within yourself, and how are you working on taking the next step to swap the roles around, if you like?
Again, it's nothing's easy and nothing's easy to answer, but I do think it's just more of the same, because what we're doing now isn't costing us race wins. Like I've been doing a good job. I've not been making really any big mistakes that have cost me things. Barcelona, for instance, I had a pretty good start. It wasn't quite enough. And I know I want a perfect start. But you're not going to have a perfect start every single race. It's too difficult to do such a thing. You strive for it, you aim for it, but it's too difficult to do. And there was no other way that I could have won that race. Similar for Canada. Could we have made better decisions? Yes. Was our pace good enough at the end of the race in the slicks? No. Imola, we did everything we could once again. But I think we're giving it a very good shot, and I don't think at the minute I would go back and change this and change that and change that, and all of a sudden we would have won a race. I think so many things have just been close because they're simply close, and you're going against what everyone has been saying as the most competitive car in history, one of, or if not the best driver ever in Formula One, a very, very competitive team, and to go up against one of these groups or teams in general, you need everything to go pretty much perfectly. And I think things are almost there, but like you're saying, it's that last 1%. And it's a little bit from the car, it's a little bit from myself. I don't think I've thrown away race wins. If I would go back to last weekend, would I do anything different? No, because I didn't do anything wrong. So I can't say that. I have to be happy with some of the things I've done. So it's more of the same, honestly. It's a very easy and clear answer in a way, because I'm happy with the job that we've been doing. It's just that thing needs to click, and it's just that tiny, tiny piece everywhere that needs to come together.
Right, now time's running out, so just a couple of quick questions to end with. First of all, how's it feel going into the British Grand Prix, knowing that you could possibly win and have a really good chance?
Much better than it did last year. I mean, already our hopes were up last year because we brought the upgrade to Austria, and we were excited to see what it could do in Silverstone. But this is my first time coming into my home race thinking, like, we could do something great here. And that's an incredible feeling because, like I said in some interviews, if I could win anywhere and only once, it would be Silverstone. So I'm very, very excited just because of the fans, the atmosphere, the feeling you get, the smile on your face. Like, I'm just excited for all of it. It just gives you a buzz and an energy that you don't get really anywhere else. So I'm looking forward to it. And with the knowledge in the back of your mind, you could go on and get another podium or a race win. It motivates everyone that little bit more.
And finally, over the winter, you not only committed to McLaren for quite some time into the future, but you also said, we will be winning races this year.
Yeah.
How did you know? What was it about what the team were doing, what Andrea Stella, the team principal, had been doing that gave you that confidence?
It's a combination of things, but trajectory that we were on, understanding and car knowledge of, we know what other teams are doing, we know what we're doing, whether it's good or bad. Then you have that middle ground as how do you recreate those good things and things that other teams have in order to get to their level. But Andrea has led most of this, and a lot of my faith was really in Andrea, in knowing what he's capable of doing, and the amount of change he's actually able to do, you know. So I guess you can never know, but I signed the contract with McLaren because I just had a lot of confidence, and that's not something, like you said in the past, it's not something I've often had a lot of. But I just had that feeling that that time was coming. A lot of people doubted it, both at the track and, you know, people watching. A lot of people doubted that we would go on and have wins and compete against Red Bull and compete and beat Ferrari and Mercedes and all these things. But yeah, deep down I had that feeling in myself that I finally had kind of everything I needed to go out and do it. And also from team side of things, in terms of our personnel, our work ethic, our motivation, the drive we need as a team in order to try and be world champions and have a race-winning car. I finally had a better picture of what it took, what is needed, and what we had. And we were not far away. We still got work to do, but we're closer than ever. And a combination of things, like I said. But Andrea, in my eyes, has been the biggest key to this whole turnaround.
Okay, thank you very much for your time, Lando, and good luck this weekend.
Thank you very much.
So, Andrew, we heard what he had to say. Just set the scene. How was he? Was he relaxed? Was he uncomfortable at all?
He was a bit poorly, actually.
Oh,
we were in what they call the signing room at the McLaren factory, and this big table, and it's covered in hats. And Jolien will be familiar with this sort of scenario, I'm sure. Hats and pictures and mini helmets and stuff, which both Norris and Oscar Piastri, his teammate, were having to sign that day. They were both at the factory, and but he was like racing drivers are often in these situations, uber professional. They come in, they don't really pay you a lot of attention, then they sit down and they engage 100% professionally. And actually, I think both of them. They've both been extremely eloquent.
Max and Norris.
Lando and Max have both been extremely eloquent in the last few days on this incident, and it's an absolute privilege to talk to them about it, actually. And I think that's what's so one of the many, many interesting aspects of this battle is that we've got two drivers who are close friends. They want to stay friends. They believe they can stay friends, and when they get off the track and have a microphone in front of them, they're smart, intelligent, and eloquent, and it's just great to see on every level.
I mean, they're media trained to within an inch of their life.
Well, I think the irony of this is I don't think this is media training. Verstappen is 100% authentic, and he's been authentic all the way through this year, whether it's been dealing with on-track action or the off-track distractions of the Christian Horner allegations, and I think Norris is the same. He actually backed down a little bit today, and in the interview from what he'd been saying on Sunday after the race. But they're both authentic, they're both genuine, they're both honest, and they're both very bright and very engaging. And I think that the remaining 12 races of the season, I think they're just something to savour.
Can you be friends and be an F1 driver fighting for a championship at the level that they are fighting at, Jolien?
I think if they keep racing as they did, no, because you can't have this all the time. You know, there were contentious moves. If you race respectfully with each other, then I think you can.
I disagree.
That's where we've been before.
I disagree. I don't think I've never seen it. And I think you can be friends right up until the point when a championship becomes at stake. Because at that point, the one thing you've wanted since you were a little kid, the dream you've had, the thing you've been fighting for your whole life, the only guy in the way of that is this other competitor. And, you know, I've seen it inside our own team at McLaren. I've seen it with Lewis and Fernando. We've seen it with Lewis and Nico Rosberg. We've seen it over the years, over and over. And I think when you get to that point, it is all out. Everything's on the table. You're going to go to any length you can to win that race, and that will cost a friendship. I just don't believe it can happen.
I think it depends on the characters, though.
That's exactly the words, more or less, word for word, that Max Verstappen used today. Everyone's a different character. I'm not the same as the people in the past, you know, the parallels that you're talking about.
But they will say that. I mean, if you think about Lewis and Nico, when they first started their relationship at Mercedes. There's that race in Bahrain. Remember when they battled the Duel in the Desert?
Duel in the Desert.
They got out of the car after that really intense battle. They were hugging each other, high-fiving, laughing. Fast forward to the point where the championship's at stake, they hated each other.
But that comes down to how they were racing on track, though. And I think even in the Duel in the Desert, there were things going on underneath the hood that Lewis wasn't very happy with, the energy usage or the strategies and things that were going. And you're in the same team, which I think intensifies anything.
Yeah, agreed.
When I was racing, I had a number of different teammates, a few that made it to F1 or are still in F1. And I found someone like Marcus Ericsson. He was a teammate for me in the equivalent of Formula 2 now, and we were mates. And we had some really tough battles on track, really tough. But we always knew we were on the same page with where the line was, what you were allowed to do, and it never went over the edge. And okay, it's not Formula 1, but this is the last step before Formula 1, and you want to, if you win the race or win the championship, you're one step closer to achieving your dream.
Was it for the championship?
No.
I think that's the difference.
It was for sixth.
I think that's the difference.
A really good sixth.
No, but I mean, I think you may well be right. We've not seen it play out, and you know that's just my experience of most people. I wasn't particularly friends with drivers in the field. He was one that stood out. Who we were teammates and we got on well. But I did feel like we weren't about to bust up because we've gone wheel to wheel into a few chicanes. Maybe in Formula 1 and fighting for a championship in Formula 1, it's just too extreme. We've not really seen it in the modern era. But there are other teammates who you never know what they're going to do, and you don't form that rapport with either. And Lando and Max, obviously at this stage, they want to try and keep the respect and the friendship. But they need to, I think, understand their own barriers and what they're prepared to cross in wheel-to-wheel racing.
Yeah, I think it's great. Sorry, Jenny. I think it's always possible up until the championship's at stake. For me, that's the line when things get really serious and friendship potentially gets in the way. If you're thinking about friendship, if you think about the guy in the other car being a mate, you're not going for the gap. You're not pushing to the absolute limit. And if there's a championship, that's what you've got to do. That's where I think the line is.
I mean, I kind of half joked at the beginning of the show saying 81 points is the gap, it's closable maybe. Is it, Andrew?
It is closable if Norris starts regularly beating Verstappen. That's the thing. I mean, we've had 5 races where it's been very close, but 3 of them Verstappen won. And Norris potentially could have won those races, potentially. I think he thinks that maybe that potential wasn't as great as it looked at the time when you properly analysed the races, but nevertheless, that's the thing. Verstappen is like an immovable object or an irresistible force. One of the two. Sometimes both, actually. And it's only going to get interesting if McLaren can start winning races regularly from now on. Otherwise, Verstappen's too strong, too consistent to let that sort of gap, which is, let's be honest, it's more than 3 clear race wins to let that sort of gap go.
5 Live Formula 1 with Andrew Benson, Mark Priestley and Jolyon Palmer. Let's move it on because we could talk all day about Norris and Verstappen. Let's talk about Ollie Behrman. Jolyon, let's come to you. He's signed a multi-year deal at Haas. He is a Ferrari young driver. He's already had an outing this year in Jeddah, driving for Ferrari and Carlos Sainz when he was poorly. How well do you rate him?
I think he looks like a real talent. It's an interesting one, the Behrman signing, because he's 14th in Formula 2. He's nearly 100 points off a rookie leader of the championship, yet no one's speaking about Paul Aaron maybe making it to Formula 1. And Behrman's been a shoe-in for a long time. But I have seen the talent. I think we've all seen it in Jeddah, how impressive he was. And I've seen it from the moment he jumped in the Haas in FP1 in Mexico, how he could slide the car. He's on the limit of grip very quickly, and you don't feel like he's about to spaff it into the wall. So I think he looks good, and he'll do the job. But there are question marks for Formula 2 then. Why we're overlooking the series leader and taking the guy out that's 14th, and maybe Antonelli, who's further down as well.
I mean, in fairness, they're driving for Prema. They're not having a good season. He has missed races. There's been a whole litany of excuses that you could put to why he isn't leading that F2 championship. But you are right. Let's hear from him right now.
It's a special feeling. It's very proud. It's when you take a step back and think about it, it's what I've been dreaming of since a kid. It's what I've been working towards for the last 12 years, something like this. So it's been a long journey, and it feels like making the step to F1 is like you start the journey, because you spend all these years trying to get to F1, and now it's finally official. I'm really excited to get started.
Obviously, lots of people have been talking about the possibility for months now. You've had an F2 campaign to deal with as well. You had that great race for Ferrari in Saudi. How have you coped with just not knowing, I guess, until just recently?
Yeah, I mean, the pressure of not knowing is tough. You want to have your future secured as soon as possible. It's great for a driver's mentality, so I'm glad that that's finally the case. And I hope it will help my performances as well. But, this has been on the cards for a while, and especially after Jeddah, which was a great result. I could see it becoming the case. So, like I said, I'm really happy that it's finally official.
So what's going to happen now? You've got some more FP1s with Haas coming up, then you've obviously got more preparations to do, and then it's your debut next year. I know it's a little bit of a way to go, but you must be excited.
Yeah, it feels special to hear that. But yeah, first of all, I need to keep focusing on Formula 2. That's my main goal at the moment, and even more so the case because I don't have anything to play on my mind anymore. I can focus fully on that, and I'm really motivated to finish well with Prema. They deserve it. It's been a great 3 years together, and I really want to finish well. They've been behind me all the way, so I want to continue to bring some good results for them. And yeah, of course, in the background, I want to improve my knowledge about F1, the weekend structure and everything like that. And of course, improve a bit physically as well, because that's something I need to work on.
And Haas must be a great team to do that with, because it looks like you're already having a lot of fun with them so far.
Yeah, I've loved every minute I spent with Haas so far. They're a great bunch. Really friendly, really welcoming, really friendly atmosphere, team atmosphere, family atmosphere. So that makes me really happy, and great people to spend my time with. And I hope this great atmosphere will bring great results.
Great, Savali. Thank you very much for your time. Cheers.
Well, as the clouds just pop over the sun and it gets a little bit chilly here, Jolyon Palmer has decided he's got a better offer tonight, so we'll ditch him for now. But Mark Priestley, you stayed with us. You're here for the long run.
Absolutely.
Just talk to me. Behrman, what do you think?
I think the difference with Behrman to some of the other young drivers that are coming through F2, for example, who are showing really well in that championship, is that he's had a go in Formula 1. And the important thing is around that is that the team that gets to work with him, i.e. Ferrari as it was in Jeddah, gets to understand a huge amount more than just what the points show on a leaderboard in that championship. It's about how you work with that guy, how he handles pressure, how he works with the engineers, gives feedback. Those things are really important, how they handle the media, how they handle a really high pressure situation, which is what he was in. Those are really important details which they have a very clear steer on, and some data and everything else on. That counts for a lot.
And another Brit in the championship for next year. That will be 4 full-time British drivers and Alex Albon, maybe 5. We haven't had that level, that amazing amount of men coming into the championship as Brits since 2013. It's impressive for British motorsport.
It speaks a lot for British motorsport and the level there, doesn't it? As George Russell was saying actually in the press conference earlier today, and they're all really good drivers as well. Ollie Behrman, obviously we haven't seen full time in Formula 1 yet, but he was extremely impressive in Saudi Arabia. I mean, look, I think even before he drove that Ferrari in Saudi Arabia, people were talking about him as being the likely Haas driver in 2025 because he's in the Ferrari Driver Academy. Haas can be used by Ferrari as a feeder team, as indeed Ken Sauber, as we saw with Charles Leclerc a few years ago. So I don't think it's a huge surprise, especially having impressed so much in Saudi Arabia. No one's saying he doesn't deserve the seat. I think that's the key point. Everyone's interested to see how he gets on.
Yeah, really interested. This is his third outing I have 6 outings in total for Haas, and this FP1 will be his third outing. So he's getting a good lot of track time.
Yeah, he is. And just they've announced today, of course, that he's on this multi-year contract without specifying exact number of years. But I would not be surprised at all if that links in very nicely to the multi-year contract that Lewis Hamilton's on at Ferrari, because if he does prove to be the succession plan, it will be a really nice fit, wouldn't it, of transitioning from a Lewis Hamilton ending his career in Ferrari to an Ollie Bearman, who may by that point have proved himself slotting into that seat.
And the link between him and Hamilton is really cool, because actually Hamilton sent Bearman a message in about 2014, 2015, around that time.
Yeah, Ollie Bearman wasn't sure about the date, was he? He said 15 or 16, but
sketchy. But anyway, this message from Hamilton to Bearman saying, good luck in F1 when you get there, if you make it. And finally he's made it. He's had this deal announced, and I'm really impressed by him and by the deal, and as you say, let's see how he goes with Ferrari. So Mark, let's turn our attentions to this weekend. What's going to happen at Silverstone, apart from probably rain at some point and sun at some point?
There is a little bit of rain on the horizon at different points over the weekend, so that's going to really spice things up. But I think we're going to carry on where we left off just a week ago in Austria. We're going to get very close battles at the front. I think we may well get Ferrari rejoining that party as well. This circuit should well suit that car, but I think it's the Max Verstappen versus Lando Norris party, and I'm here for that.
Can anyone else get into the air?
Well, I wouldn't rule out Oscar Piastri, Norris's teammate. He probably would have inherited the win, or could have inherited the win, if he hadn't had that penalty in qualifying in Austria. He was third on the grid before he got that. Not everyone agreed with that penalty, by the way. I think McLaren and Verstappen will be the main contenders. Don't know about Ferrari. They seem a little bit confused about their car at the moment, and let's not rule Mercedes out. I think they could make a step forward as well.
I'm sure they'll have the home fans cheering them on as they go through this weekend. You can listen to it all, coverage of the British Grand Prix on 5 Live from 3 p.m. on Sunday. Thanks to Jolien, to Mark, to Andrew. We're back tomorrow for the 2 practice sessions, which you can listen to on the BBC Sport website or via your smart speaker. This has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live.